The spear enters the sand 2 inches from his face. He doesn't move. Can't move. The rope cuts into his wrists so deep he stopped feeling his hands an hour ago. Around him, the sound of screaming has finally stopped. That's somehow worse than when it was happening. The city is burning. Every building, every temple, every home. The smoke is so thick he can taste metal in his throat. A shadow falls across his face. Boots. European boots. And a voice in a language he's never heard before says something that makes the other men laugh. He closes his eyes. He doesn't know it yet, but he is witnessing the erasure of an entire civilization. The year is 1591. The place is Timbuktu, West Africa, once the intellectual capital of the world. The man with the rope around his wrists is a scholar, a teacher, one of thousands who studied at Sankore University, a place that educated students when Oxford was still figuring out how to build stone buildings. But right now, none of that matters, because the Moroccan army has just invaded, and they have one mission: destroy everything, every book, every record, every proof that this place ever mattered. What you're watching is the systematic annihilation of African history. And here's the part that'll make your blood run cold. This wasn't the first time. Before we go further, you need to understand something. The African kingdoms you're about to hear about weren't just advanced for their time. They were more advanced than Europe, richer than Rome, more organized than medieval France, with architecture that would make Renaissance Italy jealous. But you never learned about them, because they were erased, deliberately, methodically, completely. And the evidence of that erasure, it's buried in the sand, scattered in museum basements, hidden in archives that most people will never see. This is that story. And I promise you, you're not ready for what comes next. Let's go back further, way further. The year is 300 AD. There's a kingdom in what is now Sudan called Kush, specifically the city of Merowe. You've never heard of it, and that's the point. Because at its peak, Merowe was producing more iron than anywhere else in the ancient world. The slag heaps, the waste piles from iron smelting, are so massive they're still visible from space. We're talking about industrial-level metallurgy in Africa in the 3rd century. The Kushites built over 200 pyramids, more than Egypt. Smaller, sure, but more numerous and just as sophisticated. They had a written language, Meroic script, that we still haven't fully deciphered. They had queens, kandakes, who ruled as equals to kings, led armies, and appeared on their own currency. One of these queens, Amanirenas, literally fought the Roman Empire to a standstill. She lost an eye in battle, negotiated a peace treaty with Augustus Caesar himself, and got everything she wanted. The Romans never invaded Kush again. A one-eyed African queen made Rome back down. Why don't you know her name? Here's why. When the Kingdom of Kush finally fell around 350 AD, it wasn't to Rome, it was to another African kingdom, Axum, in modern-day Ethiopia. But here's where the story gets buried. For centuries, European archaeologists and historians had a problem. They kept finding evidence of advanced African civilizations, and it didn't fit the narrative they needed. See, colonization required a story. The story was simple. Africa was primitive, uncivilized, waiting to be saved. But then they'd dig up a city with drainage systems, or find gold work more intricate than anything in medieval Europe, or discover universities that predated Cambridge. So they did what colonizers always do when the truth is inconvenient. They changed it. They claimed Egyptians weren't African. They said Great Zimbabwe was built by Phoenicians or Arabs, anyone but black Africans. They lost artifacts. They reclassified findings. They published papers with conclusions that contradicted their own data. One archaeologist in the 1920s literally wrote, "The ruins cannot be African in origin because Africans are incapable of such construction." He wrote that while standing in front of African ruins. That's not ignorance. That's erasure. You need to pause and think about what that means. Entire kingdoms, entire civilizations, thousands of years of history, innovation, art, science, and culture. Gone. Not because they fell naturally, not because they were conquered and absorbed, but because acknowledging them would have made slavery and colonization harder to justify. You can't call a people savage if they built universities. You can't claim a continent needs civilization if it already had it. So the evidence was buried, sometimes literally. And the story we're about to tell you is just one of dozens, but it's one of the most heartbreaking. Let's talk about Mansa Musa. You might have heard the name, maybe seen a meme about him being the richest person in history, but you probably don't know the full story, because the full story is insane. The year is 1324. Mansa Musa, emperor of the Mali Empire, decides to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. Standard religious journey, right? Wrong. He brings 60,000 people with him. Soldiers, officials, servants, civilians, an entire traveling city. He brings 80 camels, each one carrying 300 pounds of gold. Do the math. That's 24,000 pounds of gold, just being carried across the Sahara like it's no big deal. When he passes through Cairo, he's so generous, just giving away gold, that he crashes the Egyptian economy. The value of gold drops so fast that it takes 12 years to recover. One man, one trip, destroys the economy of one of the world's major powers. By accident. That's not a legend, that's in the historical record. Egyptians and Arab historians documented it. But here's what they don't teach you. Mansa Musa wasn't just rich. The Mali Empire wasn't just wealthy. It was advanced. Timbuktu, the capital, had 3 universities. The largest, Sankore, had a library with over 700,000 manuscripts in the 14th century. Let that sink in. While Europe was burning witches and dying of plague, Timbuktu had a larger collection of written knowledge than almost anywhere else on Earth. They studied astronomy, mathematics, medicine, law, and philosophy. They performed cataract surgery. They had detailed astronomical charts. They wrote poetry that rivaled anything in the Islamic Golden Age. One scholar, Ahmed Baba, personally owned 1,600 books. One guy, in the 1500s. The city was a trade hub. Gold and salt, yes, but also ideas. People came from across the Islamic world to study there. It was the intellectual crossroads of its age. And it was black. Unapologetically. Undeniably. So what happened to it? Let's go back to that man, the one with the rope around his wrists. It's 1591. The Moroccan Sultan has just sent an army south. Officially, He wants control of the gold trade. But really, he wants to crush Mali, because Mali represents something dangerous, proof that black African kingdoms can rival anyone. The Moroccan forces have something Mali doesn't have: guns. Lots of them, supplied by European powers who are very interested in destabilizing West Africa. The Battle of Tondibi is a massacre. The Malian army, larger, braver, better trained, is destroyed by gunfire. Muskets versus swords. It's not even close. The Moroccans take Timbuktu, and this is where it gets evil. They don't just conquer the city, they erase it.
Soldiers go building to building. They're looking for one thing: books, manuscripts, scrolls, any written record of what this place was. They find them, stacks of them, rooms full of them, and they burn them. Scholars are rounded up, teachers, doctors, astronomers, people who've spent their entire lives preserving knowledge. Some are killed. Most are enslaved and sent north. The rest scatter into the desert, carrying whatever manuscripts they can save. Ahmed Baba, the guy with 1,600 books, is captured. He's dragged to Marrakesh in chains, forced to teach Moroccan elites. His library? Stolen, scattered, most of it lost forever. In the span of a few years, one of the greatest centers of learning in human history is gutted. The University of Sankore closes, the libraries are destroyed, the trade routes collapse. Timbuktu becomes a shadow, a rumor, a myth. And here's the sickest part. When European explorers finally reach Timbuktu in the 1800s, they find a small, poor desert town. And they write about it like they're disappointed. One French explorer literally wrote, "I found Timbuktu to be nothing but mud huts and sand." Yeah, because you destroyed it 200 years earlier. European guns enabled the Moroccan invasion. European trade destabilized the region. European demand for slaves turned West Africa into a war zone. And then Europeans showed up and said, "See, nothing here, just primitive people." It's gaslighting on a civilizational scale. But here's what they didn't know. The people of Timbuktu didn't let it all burn. When the Moroccans came, families hid manuscripts in walls, in the desert, buried in secret locations passed down through generations. For 400 years, these families protected the written history of Mali in silence, in secret. Because they knew that if the world forgot Timbuktu existed, it would be like it never did. In the 1990s, researchers started finding these hidden libraries. Families came forward, brought out manuscripts their great-great-great-grandparents had hidden. Some were damaged, some were in perfect condition. As of today, over 700,000 manuscripts have been recovered. Let me say that again, 700,000. They're written in Arabic, but they're African, written by Africans about African science, African history, African law, African medicine. One manuscript contains an astronomical chart that matches modern star maps almost perfectly. Another details a surgical procedure for cataracts. Another is a trade contract from the 1400s showing economic complexity that rivals Renaissance Italy. These aren't legends. These are receipts. And they were almost lost forever. But Timbuktu isn't the only story. You want to know what else was erased? Let's talk about Great Zimbabwe. The year is 1871. A German explorer named Karl Mauch stumbles onto ruins in southern Africa. Massive stone walls, 30 feet high. No mortar, just perfectly fitted stones. Intricate designs, towers, courtyards. It's more sophisticated than most medieval European castles. And it's in the middle of Africa. Mouch does what any good colonizer does. He decides it can't be African. He literally claims it was built by the Queen of Sheba, or the Phoenicians, or Arabs, anyone but the Shona people who actually lived there and say, yeah, her ancestors built this. The British South Africa Company takes over the site. And what do? They loot it. They rip gold artifacts off the walls. They dig up graves looking for treasure. They destroy layers of archaeology to get at the good stuff. And all the time, they're publishing papers saying Africans couldn't have built this. One archaeologist, Richard Hall, literally removed 12 feet of archaeological deposits because he thought they were contaminating the site. 12 feet, centuries of history, gone. Why? Because those deposits showed continuous African habitation, African construction, African civilization. And that was inconvenient. Great Zimbabwe was built between the 11th and 15th centuries. At its peak, it housed 18,000 people. It was the capital of a vast trade empire. They traded gold, ivory, and iron with Swahili city-states on the coast, who traded with Arabia, India, and China. Archaeologists have found Chinese pottery at Great Zimbabwe, Persian glass, coins from the Islamic world. This wasn't a backwater. It was a hub. The stonework is so precise that modern engineers still study it. No mortar, just stone on stone, and it's still standing. But because it didn't fit the narrative, it was dismissed, looted, stripped. And when Zimbabwe gained independence in 1980, they named their country after it, reclaiming the name, reclaiming the history. But the damage was done. Entire generations grew up thinking Africa had no history, no kingdoms, no achievements. Just tribes and huts. That's what erasure looks like. Here's the pattern. Advanced African civilization exists, thrives, creates. Colonizers arrive, destroy it, loot it, rewrite it, then claim it never existed. And if you point out the evidence, they'll say you're making it up, being Afrocentric, exaggerating. Even when the ruins are still standing. Even when the manuscripts are still readable, even when the archaeology proves it. You want one more example? Let's talk about the Kingdom of Kongo. The year is 1482. Portuguese explorer Diogo Cao sails into the mouth of the Congo River. He's expecting to find savages. What he finds, instead, is a kingdom. The Kingdom of Kongo. A centralized state with a king, a court, provinces, governors, a legal system, and a capital city, Mansa Kongo, that houses 60,000 people. For reference, London at the time had about 50,000. The Congolese have paved roads. They have a currency system. They have diplomats. They have taxes. When the Portuguese arrive, the Congolese king, Nzinga Nkuu, doesn't bow. He negotiates as an equal. He converts to Christianity, not because he's forced to, but because he sees it as politically advantageous. He renames himself João I. He sends ambassadors to Portugal and the Vatican. His son, Alfonso I, writes letters to the King of Portugal, in Portuguese, discussing theology, trade, and diplomacy. These letters still exist. You can read them. One line written in 1526 will break your heart. Alfonso writes, "We cannot estimate how great the damage is, since the mentioned merchants are taking every day our natives, sons of the land, and sons of our noblemen and vassals and our relatives. Thieves and men of bad conscience grab them and cause them to be sold. And so great, sir, is the corruption that our country is being completely depopulated." Read that again. A king, an African king, writing to a European king, begging him to stop the slave trade, because it's destroying his kingdom. And Portugal's response? They ignore him. They keep taking people, more and more. By the 1600s, the Kingdom of Kongo is a hollow shell. The population is gutted. The economy is shattered. The provinces are in revolt because there's no one left to govern them. Portuguese merchants don't just take slaves. They fund civil wars to create more slaves. They arm rival factions. They destabilize the region on purpose. By 1665, the kingdom is so weak that a Portuguese-backed rival kills the king in battle. The Kingdom of Kongo collapses. Not because it was primitive, not because it was weak, because Europe needed bodies and didn't care what it had to destroy to get them. Here's why this matters today. When people say Africa has no history, what they mean is, I was never taught African history. And that's not an accident. The erasure didn't stop with colonization. It continued in textbooks, in curriculums, in museums. Even now, most African artifacts are in European museums. The British Museum alone holds over 73,000 African objects, looted, stolen, acquired. The Benin bronzes, sculptures so intricate that European scholars initially claimed they must have been made by Europeans, are scattered across the world. Nigeria has been asking for them back for decades. Germany recently agreed to return some. France is starting to. Britain is considering it. These aren't just artifacts. They're proof. Proof of what was. Proof of what was destroyed.
And every year they sit in a European vault. The erasure continues. Let's go back to Timbuktu one more time. In 2013, during the Malian Civil War, extremist groups occupied the city, and just like in 1591, they started burning manuscripts, thousands of them, priceless records of African history, gone up in smoke. But this time, something different happened. Librarians and ordinary citizens smuggled manuscripts out, in donkey carts, in boats, hidden under grain sacks. They risked their lives. Some were killed. But they saved 350,000 manuscripts because they knew what the world keeps trying to forget, that this history matters, that it's theirs, and that if they don't protect it, no one will. One librarian, Abdelkader Haidara, organized the whole operation. When asked why, he said, "These manuscripts are our history. Without them, we are nothing." Here's what they don't tell you in school. Africa didn't fall behind. Africa was pushed behind. Every resource, every person, every idea extracted, stolen, erased. And then the people who did it wrote the history books and said, "See, they never had anything to begin with." That's not history. That's a heist. The Mali Empire wasn't primitive. It was gutted. Great Zimbabwe wasn't a mystery. It was looted. The Kingdom of Kongo didn't collapse naturally. It was destroyed for profit. And the evidence of all of it, the manuscripts, the ruins, the letters, was buried, burned, or locked away. Because empires aren't just built on land and resources. They're built on forgetting. Forgetting what was destroyed to build them. Forgetting who was erased. Forgetting that the people you colonized were people. But here's the thing about the truth. It doesn't stay buried forever. Right now, all over Africa, archaeologists are digging, historians are translating, families are opening their vaults, and the history is coming back, piece by piece. It turns out you can burn books, you can topple kingdoms, you can rewrite textbooks, but you can't erase the truth. Because someone, somewhere, will always hide a manuscript, will always remember a story, will always say, "No,
This happened, and I'm not letting you forget. The ancient Black kingdoms weren't wiped out by time. They were wiped out on purpose. But they're not gone. They're just waiting to be remembered. And now you know. So what are you going to do with that? If this made you angry, good. It should. Share this. Talk about it. Look it up yourself. The manuscripts of Timbuktu are being digitized right now. You can see them online. The ruins of Great Zimbabwe are still there. You can visit them. The letters of Alfonso I are in archives. You can read them. The history is real, and it's been waiting for you this whole time. Don't let them bury it again.